Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our latest Leaders in Literacy webinar series. And our latest episode actually is a bonus episode. With all the distance learning going on out there, we have a special guest today. It's Melissa Busolo is joining us from South Carolina. She's originally from Colorado and got her start at Center School District at Haskin Elementary. She's been in education for 17 years. She's a native of Colorado and 2 years ago moved out to South Carolina and has been remotely coaching her peers. She got her start in a second grade classroom back in 2003. After 7 years in the classroom, she actually was Teacher of the Year. After 7 years in the classroom, she became a literacy coach and has been coaching her peers since. She moved to South Carolina in 2016 and has continued to coach her peers remotely, which is kind of perfect for today's theme. We're going to talk about remote learning, distance learning. She currently provides literacy coaching to 12 schools remotely across 14 school districts. And she's going to tell you more about that. But welcome, Melissa. Thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm really excited to be here today and to be talking about distance learning and some of the things that we've been working on over the last few weeks.
I bet. I've been hearing about them, so this is going to be fun for you to share it with everyone else. But tell us a little bit about where you're from originally and just where you work and what the makeup is of the valley that you work in remotely.
Right. So I am a San Luis Valley native. I'm actually a fourth generation San Luis Valley native. And I grew up in the San Luis Valley, more specifically in Center. And I started teaching in Center in 2003 and spent some years in the classroom. And then, as you mentioned, I became a literacy coach and was at Haskin Elementary as a literacy coach for a few years. And then we had an opportunity with the San Luis Valley BOCES. So a BOCES is all of the school districts partnering together to provide services. So there are 14 school districts that work together, and we received a grant from the Colorado Department of Education for increasing growth and achievement for students with IEPs. And through that, I was able to move into a position where I was able to work with the different Valley school districts. And so here you have a map of the different BOCES throughout Colorado. And if you notice down at the bottom, in the southern part, we are the San Luis Valley BOCES in light green. There are 14 school districts, and you can see it covers a large area. One of the things about us is we're spaced apart. And so we have, although we have 14 districts in a similar area, we do have things that are unique to each district. So as you can see, some areas look really big, and what that is it's really rural, and farming is really important there, ranching, and we have districts, some having around 120 students PK through 12, to our largest district that has approximately 1,700 students PK through 12. So you can see that there are varying degrees of student enrollment within each district. As you mentioned, there's 14 of them. This year I'm working with 9 districts specifically. There are 12 schools within those districts that I'm able to work with. And we have some small intervention groups that are happening within each of those districts. And so that's really what I do. And as you mentioned also, I am in South Carolina. So I grew up in the San Luis Valley and I love it there. That's home. I imagine that no matter how long I'm away from it, it'll always be home to me. And I had a unique opportunity when I got ready to move, and life brought me to South Carolina to still continue to contribute to things that are going on in the San Luis Valley. And it's so important to me that I had to take them up on the offer, and I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to continue to work with the teachers and students of the San Luis Valley, which even though we're 1,500 miles apart, we continue to work together. And I guess this kind of lent itself to the situation that we're in now, and made the transition for me a little bit easier, but also an opportunity for me to share some of the things that I've learned over the past few years.
So the professional development that you're providing, you've been doing that remotely. What's changed is the distance learning for students. So they're all online now working with their teachers, but you've been Zooming with them before. So that's going to be something that when you talk about that today, I think that's a really, you've got some great stories and some great examples of how you've all made that work. So I'm excited to hear about that again, right. For sure. Yeah.
Yes, so the teachers really have been amazing. And one of the things that I think about when we started this distance learning is really what we've been doing with our Lindamood-Bell instruction. And when I think about the big picture, making it fit, this really is what I picture in my mind. And it's just like the Lindamood-Bell learning process. We respond to meet the needs of our students. This distance learning must also be adapted to meet the needs of the students in our respective districts. So as you saw in that map, each of our districts, although they're fairly close together, they all have different needs. And so we really have had to adapt, and there are 14 school districts, but they're each approaching this distance learning in their own unique way. So as we got started, when we found out about the changes in what school would look like for our students, we had to take inventory. And I know I'm saying we, but I do want to give credit where credit is due, because so much of the things that happened within each school district individually, and their administrators really jumped into action. So when this occurred, it was right over the spring break time. And so students, teachers, everybody was on break, and we were getting information from the governor about what learning would look like in schools. And like I said, the administrators really jumped into action. And the first thing that had to happen was an inventory. Administrators had to take inventory of a few things. First of all, their staff. As I mentioned, some of the districts are a lot smaller. And so there are teachers who wear many hats within the district. And so administrators really had to take inventory of the staff that was available, and also what that would look like, how everybody would have to adjust to meet the needs within this new plan. They also had to take inventory of their resources. So in a few of the districts, there is some one-to-one work where students have access to a device. However, there are some school districts that don't have that already in place. So one of the things that we had to look at was the access of technology. So first of all, do our students have access to a device, and what does that look like? What kind of device do they have access to? And then in addition to that, do they have access to Wi-Fi? So for some of our students, they are in some remote areas, and they are in the mountains, and they may have some Wi-Fi service, but it may not be to the capacity to stream in a Zoom meeting or a class on Google Classroom. And so all of these things had to be assessed, and then the planning could take place. So next came the setting of the expectations. What does that look like? And as I mentioned, those administrators got together. They're meeting at this point with teachers. They've been communicating to us what we should expect moving forward. And so at this point, over the spring break, I know for myself within our BOCES, we had received expectations from our executive director about school resuming. So we would come back into session as soon as spring break was over, but that week would be time for us to plan and take our own inventory and get ready to see what we could provide. And so I know that many looked at grade levels. So are we going to focus specifically on instruction at the grade levels, or are we going to include interventions? And so this goes back to the device. How many have access to it? Do we have families where there are multiple students that will need access to those devices? Interventions. Is this something that's going to add to what parents are doing? Is it necessary to continue? We had some questions come up. I know a few school districts said, hey, we're just going to start off with grade level. So within their classroom, this is where we're going to start. We're going to include interventionists. They can provide some feedback, but we can control it a lot better if we're just having that classroom teacher focus on their specific students. What are our instructional goals? How will instruction be delivered? And so this was a conversation for many of them asking, will we do online classes? And so that goes back to the inventory piece, right? Are we able to do online classes, or will we be doing paper and pencil packets? And so how much time will students spend with instructors or working on assignments outside of class? I like to say that both administrators and teachers really spent a lot of time thinking about what kind of impact this was going to have on students. And I've heard from a few of my leaders that they had information from their administrators to really be thoughtful about the type of work that was going home and how much the students were going to need to do, what kind of support they were going to need, and then to reflect back on how our instruction was going to be delivered. Basically, the biggest thing that we knew was that this must be all of it must be well-defined and clear to all. So clear to all of the teachers who are providing this instruction, but also clear to parents so that they know what to expect in moving forward. And so this was just really kind of setting our goals for what this should look like.
That's great. That's great.
So the next thing was, what does communication look like? And so we all know how important communication is when we are working within our buildings, when we are communicating with parents. And something that we have to consider and keep in mind is making sure that our communication is consistent, that we do the same thing each time. There's that clear expectation, so it's well-defined and clear to all, that we're considerate of the people that we're communicating with, and also that our communication is very clear and purposeful.
Yeah, you had some great examples of this when we spoke, and kind of how you broke it out in terms of, who you're communicating with. So I'm excited for you to share this with everyone. I think this will be super relevant and very helpful.
Yes, so thank you. What does communication look like? This was something that I wanted to break down into what we should picture for that. So within the school, consistent team check-in meetings. As I mentioned before, we were getting information through our BOCES from our executive director. Administrators were sending information to their staffs independently. But then also there came a time where we would check in together. So we had meeting check-ins within our BOCES, but we also, our MTSS team, which is our multi-tiered systems of support team at the San Luis Valley BOCES, we got together as a way to get a clear message for everybody. So we've also scheduled consistent team check-in meetings. I work with one specific school where they meet twice a week. And so they're very consistent about the times that they check in. They spend time together reviewing what has happened within their groups. they talk about communication with parents, and they also talk about anything that's working for their students, engagement. So there's a lot of things that are going on with these check-in meetings. The next thing was being considerate of our colleagues. So this is new for all of us. And as you can see, we're in our homes today, right? And so the things that we're used to being at school and being able to walk into a colleague's office or classroom and have conversations, that looks a little bit different now because we've all taken our work home with us. We're used to that, right? But just really kind of defining what that looks like at home, maybe even setting up a few boundaries of when we talk to our colleagues, because not only are we learning something new in terms of how do we do distance learning, we're also trying to balance that out with our home lives. And this is a time that's so unprecedented that we're all navigating through this together. And so being really considerate of the fact that our colleagues may be doing their job, but they may also be responsible for their children or at home in terms of teaching and helping them get online as well. So we have to be really considerate of our colleagues. And then also have a clear focus for each meeting. So these team meetings that I mentioned before, they've got a clear focus each time. They still, even though everybody's on Zoom, they still have their norms set up. Somebody facilitates the meeting and they get in there, have really great discussions, and we're able to go. So that's what communication can look like for school. In terms of what does communication look like for students and parents? So this was an interesting thing because one of the things we consistently talk about is communicating with parents and how important it is to let them know what's going on. And so one of the things that we did was consistent instruction times for students. So initially, when we went back to that place of checking the inventory and making the decision on what instruction would look like, when the decision was made to have intervention groups, at least in terms of the Lindamood-Bell support that we provide for students, we decided that it's important to have consistent instruction times for students. We did that during the school year. Of course, we have schedules at school. Why wouldn't we have schedules at home? So making sure that the times that you're meeting are consistent, whether it's consistent days or consistent time that you're meeting each day, that's really important. The next thing is be considerate of parent time and their schedules at home. I know that for us, one of the big things we talked about was making sure that we were communicating, but we also have to keep in mind that parents may have more than one child in school. They may have more than one child in different school buildings or different classrooms. And so it's really important when we think about how we're communicating it, that we document that, and that we also make sure that if it's a student who's shared, that we're sharing information in those team meeting check-ins, right? So one of the school districts that I work with, specifically in one school building, in their check-in, they're taking inventory of what students they are going to communicate with. They have a log that says, they're marking down when they're meeting with students. That is really important that we are keeping in mind what our parents are going through. So many things could have changed for our parents at this point. For some, it may be a loss of a job, so they may not be employed during this time and they find themselves at home. There's a lot going on. And so we want to be really considerate of the times that we're reaching out and how often we're reaching out. They may still be working and maybe there isn't the childcare that they had in the past. And so we also have to take that into consideration when we're calling, that we're not just calling when it's convenient for us as educators, because they may be at work. And so I had one teacher mention that she actually asks, is it okay if I call you at this time? And that allows parents to say, yes, go ahead and call at that time, and they're ready for that phone call. Or they can say, no, this time will be better for me. And so really taking all of that into considerations, making sure that if we have a shared student, that maybe one of us calls and we're saying everything that needs to be said and asking the questions, and then communicating amongst ourselves as teachers, because there's so much that our families are facing right now, and we want to make sure that what we're doing is helping them, not hindering them. And so it's great to show that we're here and that we care, but do it in a way that's considerate for our parents. And make sure each time we call that our message is clear and purposeful, that we're not calling just because we said we would call this many times a week, but have a clear message for our parents. And so I know that our districts are really good about setting guidelines for how often parents should be called and contacted. But I think that as we go through this process, we're getting to know our parents a lot better. I would say it's safe to say that our relationship with parents has developed in a way that's so unique that may not have happened when we were at school, because we were having parent-teacher conferences, but now it's almost like an ongoing parent-teacher conference. And so we want to be considerate of that, and just make sure that it's working for them and not just what works best for us.
Yeah, when you mentioned this to me before, Melissa, I was thinking, and I started asking my friends who have, kids at home right now, obviously, and I asked them, how many phone calls are you getting from the school? And it was really such a variation. And I get what, schools and teachers are up against. They're trying to make sure they're communicating. But the example you gave about almost making that a part of the MTSS process is that we're going to communicate this way. Here's our plan for communicating with those parents. And especially if they, parents have multiple kids in a school and you're getting X number of phone calls times however many kids, it just seemed like it could be very overwhelming. So that's an example that really stuck with me. So thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome. So then came time. As I'm telling this, it's really a progression of how we rolled this out. Time to connect with our students. Many of our districts are, something that's very important for us is making sure that we're documenting what this looks like, because when we come back to all of this, we want to be able to present a clear picture of how we did, how often we reached out to parents, what our conversations look like, but most importantly, what did the instruction look like for our students? And so something that I know my administrator has said to us several times is document. Make sure that you're keeping track of what this looks like. One of the things that we were told is, hey, faith doesn't end, right? We still need to be providing the best instruction for our students. And that's why we all became teachers, right? We want to do what's best for kids. And so in terms of providing that great instruction that you're all doing, documenting it is so important. So we just log our communication. I know for myself, whenever I work with teachers, I have a log and I log what we talked about. I keep in terms, any support that I provided, whether it was a phone conversation or it was something that we did via Zoom. So was it virtual? Was it phone? Was it an email? And so those are things that I think are really important to document. So this is the same with connecting with students. One of the schools that I've mentioned before, they've done such a great job. They actually have a shared document where they log communication and they have a point system for it. So when we do have our virtual classes, if the student participated in class the entire time, they get a point. So if the student was not a part of class and they were able to reach out to parents and make contact, they get half a point. And then if they weren't able to contact parents and the student didn't show up, they put a 0 in there. And that just gives them a numerical documentation of, through this point system, of how they're communicating. And so they're able to take out that information and have something that shows this is what it looked like for this particular student. Another thing that we're doing is we document the attendance for students. So some of our students are very consistent. They're there every day, right as group starts. Some, there are things that may be keeping them from logging in every day, but we're able to document whether or not they're there. So we log their attendance in Informs, which is a platform that Lindamood-Bell has that we're able to access and keep our attendance. And then later what we'll do is we'll print out a report individually per student, and then we'll actually upload that into our other format where we keep information on IEPs. And so if we need to, we can print that or save that and then just attach it per student, which we think is very important, because not only do our students move within a school district, so they may move from one building to another, so that information is going to be there next year. So if let's say we've got a 5th grader moving up to 6th grade and now they're in a completely new building, we'll have documentation of how many hours of instruction they received over this time. Also, some of our students, they move within the San Luis Valley. And so if they move from one school to another, there's another form of documentation that's there, and it's taking away that guesswork that we have. And so those are a few ways that we're logging our communication. So some it's done within a building or district level, but in addition to that, we're also doing it in terms of our Lindamood-Bell implementation. So another thing that we really experienced when we got started was whether or not students were able to log in. And this may be something that you've gone through, is just figuring out how to get everybody on board, whether you're using Google Classrooms, whether you're using Zoom. I know that there are other variations of programs that are out there that school districts might be using, but it doesn't matter what platform you're using, you may have experienced students having trouble logging in. And I actually went through this with one of my teachers. We were set to meet, and she said to me, she said, I only have one student that logged in, and I'm not sure why. And, I've reached out to parents, I've called them. She had done all of her due diligence and making sure that her students could get there. And I said, how about this? How about you send me the information and see if I can log in? And that way I can see it from the student view. And so she sent me the information, and as I tried to log in, I got stuck, and I use Zoom every day, and I was unable to get into the Zoom meeting. And so we talked about that. And we had the idea that instead of sending out the links the way that we had done it through Google Classroom, but is to take that link out, so remove any technology barriers and just put it in an email. Put it in an email where parents, all they have to do is click on the link and see if they can log in. So we practiced this again. And so we went from one day where 1 out of 4 students was online to the next day where 3 of 4 are. So just removing that technology barrier was so important for getting our students there and getting that consistent attendance. So if you haven't done this, or and you're still having some students that are having issues, it might be helpful to have somebody practice accessing your session and just see how easy it is. That's one thing we did together. And also, I was on another webinar and they were talking about how important it is to review it in student view. And so even in your own classrooms that you're working on virtually, if you have access to either setting yourself up as a student, or if you can approach it in the way that your students are and see it in their view, I think that's really helpful.
That's such a great example. I've shared that since I talked to you about this probably 5 times. Everyone's really grateful for that, for sure. It's great advice.
Well, like I said before, these ideas are not mine. They belong to the teachers, and teachers are amazing. And I'm very fortunate to work with some of the best teachers around, and just they want to do so much for their students, and this is giving them a unique opportunity to just show how amazing they are. Teachers are resilient, they're hard workers, and they'll take on anything, and I really do appreciate that. So these stories are teachers just being amazing that I'm lucky enough to share with you, and I learn from them all every day. So in thinking about that, once we got past those barriers, it was just, what do our online groups look like? Something that we knew was important was for our instruction was making sure that there were resources for both the instructors and students. So making sure we had what we needed to provide the instruction, but also, what do our students need? What is their learning style going to look like how is that going to transfer over when they are online? And so these are the things that we had to think about outside the box. And I know I had teachers who did amazing things and still are doing amazing things, where I have one teacher who drives all over and drops things off at the doorstep and then calls her students and waves at them from her car. And and she's not the only one. They're all doing this in some way. So making sure that those resources are available, whether you're delivering them or there's a pickup location or whatever your district is doing for that. We had to update all of our lesson plans. So when we went back to that other piece about deciding what instruction was going to look like, for one of the districts, they decided that they would continue with instruction, but it was going to be for less time during the day, to accommodate for multiple siblings and other reasons as well. So we had to go back and update all of our lesson plans to make sure that they match what we're doing now, because our online instruction looks a little bit different than it did when we were in the classroom. So those were some of the big things that we had to do. And then next came group management. So once we got started, one of the big things that came up in our meetings was, hey, how does it look for you? How are your groups going with kids? And, what is it that you're doing? And I thought those were some of the great conversations, because teachers were really taking a look at learning styles in a whole different light. And they were really taking the time to say, this is really working for so-and-so, or this isn't working. What can I do on my end to make sure that they're able to be successful in this new scenario? Because we're going to be doing this until the unforeseeable future. And so one of the big issues that came up, or discussion points that we talked about, was group management. What does that look like? So some of our teachers, we use magic stones, so that nonverbal reinforcement that's used in Lindamood-Bell groups, and they continue to use it. And so as students are doing well, I know some of my teachers, they have cups set up, and they'll actually put the stones in the cups and then afterwards count them. I've heard some teachers say, if you log into your into your Google Classroom later, you'll see how many stones you earned today. I have one teacher that has her students tally. So the students are taking an active role in that as well. And she'll say to them, all right, add 10 stones. And so they're adding up stones at groups. So that's one thing that they're using. Another is games. And so how do you play a game virtually? One game that we learned early on when I started teaching Lindamood-Bell groups was trashketball. So it's a variation of basketball using your trash can. And so I have a couple of teachers who their kids love it. We played it in class, and one of the days a student said, "Hey, can we play that game again?" And so, of course, the teacher, thinking quickly, said, "Sure, go get your trash cans." And so all of the students brought their trash cans and set them up for her, and they got to play. So games, game boards, anything that we can do to really engage students in a way that's purposeful and we're still focused on our instruction. It's fun, it's different, but it's purposeful. And so those are the things that we're thinking about. Another is a hook. We are being invited into our students' houses. We're guests in their houses. And so as we join them every day, we really just need to be respectful of that and thoughtful of the fact that, hey, here you can come into my home, and they're curious about our homes. And that's one of the things. So in thinking about a hook, one of the teachers I work with, she shared that she has a dog. And one day, as she was providing instruction, the dog barked. And of course, all the kids are really curious because she has a dog and they want to see it. And she said, "Sure. Once we get through everything," remember, teachers are you guys are amazing. Once we get through everything, then I'll introduce you to my dog. And so, of course, she followed through and did that. And she said to them, "Well, if you have a pet, tomorrow we can have some show and tell time." And I'm hearing a lot of teachers do that. "Tomorrow we will do a show and tell, and I want you to pick something out," or "Today I want you to find something in your house, and tomorrow be ready to share about it." So they have a hook, and they end their session looking forward to tomorrow. And I think that's a great way to wrap up and keep kids involved and keep them thinking about what's coming next. I had one parent say to me, she said, "This is the one thing that my daughter builds her day around every day, because every day she knows she's going to meet for this specific amount of time. And so we just build the whole day around it." And so I think it's really important because they're looking forward to it too. And we're seeing our kids in a different light. We're getting to know them in a different way. And so this hook is really important, to just say, this is what we're going to do tomorrow. And so I've seen some teachers do amazing things. And those are just a few examples. So I've got some other examples here. I asked them if they would share some pictures of some of the things that they've done, and I just really want to give credit to them at how amazing they are. And you can see these pictures, but one of my teachers, they had an ice cream celebration, and so she packed up her cooler with prizes and ice cream and drove it. And mind you, if you go back to that map at the very beginning, some of these teachers are traveling 30 miles each way to deliver these to students. And so you see in the second picture, a teacher putting a prize in a mailbox, right? And so the kids are looking out the door and waving and know she's there, and they know that their teacher's still there for them. So not only virtually, but they're still finding ways to be there for their students. In the top right-hand corner, you can see a teacher who got some prizes together, some baskets, and so with the nonverbal reinforcement, they earned so many of those magic stones, and then they get a prize. And so this teacher dropped them off to each of her students. And then down at the bottom, that's one of the games that one of the teachers is playing. We talked about, instructionally, how do we keep them all engaged? The question was, I have a student who's moving faster than some of the others, and he seems like he's starting to check out a little bit. So what can I do to keep him engaged? And so one of the things that we talked about in those weekly checkups was making sure that we were asking differentiated questions for our students. So asking a symbol imagery question that may be a little bit more challenging for certain students to help engage. And so that's just another way to say that would be doing some advanced phonological awareness questioning. And so what she did is down at the bottom, you can see it. When the students would get one of those challenging questions, they got it right. It was a strike for her. And once they each got a strike, then they would strike her out. And that was just, really in the moment thinking. They wanted to see that they were actually striking her out. She just grabbed a piece of paper, put some X's on there, one for each strike. And you see the student down at the bottom when they struck her out. It's quick thinking, teachers doing what they always do, and just doing it in a new way. And so these were just a few examples of what they're doing. So perfect time for PD. So what does this time look like? This is a perfect time, I know, for myself, and hopefully you've taken some time to do this as well. Take some time to do some professional development. There are many opportunities that are out there right now. Our schedules are a little bit more flexible than they normally are. It allows for times for collaboration. So many times I remember when I was in a specific district, we would say, oh, it would be so great if we could all get together, but we can't because so-and-so has specials at this time, but I'm teaching a class, and, really trying to coordinate all those schedules are really difficult. But with the flexibility that we have right now is a great time to schedule some of those meetings and really talk about things that are going on right now. So how do we get each other through this, but also for planning for next year? And so what does that look like? This is a whole new approach. There's so many questions out there. I know for some teachers, it's how are you engaging students? Or so when we get online, how are you keeping them accountable to make sure that they're participating? And so not only getting our students online, that's one part of it, but then really making sure that they're being accountable for their learning in that process. So this is a really wonderful opportunity for that. And then professional learning communities. So how do we assess the instructional needs of our students? This is that time where we're getting together in our PLCs and we're just looking at data or progress monitoring data. I know I had one teacher and he said, I'm going to do this progress monitoring now. It'll give me a pretty good picture. And I just want to see how they're doing. I don't know about you, but for me, when we learned that we would have school for the remainder of the year without student contact, I was a little bit heartbroken for so many reasons, mostly because I miss my kiddos and I like being able to be there and see them. And although I teach or I support remotely, I still do site visits. So I go down to the schools and I spend about 2 weeks in the San Luis Valley each quarter. And I get to spend the time with the students. And so I was really sad about not being able to do that. And then on another level, not being able to see all of the growth that they've made throughout the year. We've talked about with different administrators what assessment would look like, and really keeping in mind fidelity, right? We want to make sure that we're doing this assessment in a way that's done with fidelity. It's valid information that we're getting, thinking about whether or not a student's being at home and engaging in this instruction. If we were to provide an assessment, is that environment conducive to what we would create at schools, and thinking about that data. And so really having conversations about what that's going to look like, both at the end of this year, but then also for next year.
Yeah.
So that takes us to future goals, and just thinking about our goals for 2019, 2020. What are end of year goals, and what do end of year assessments look like? I've had some conversations with both administrators and staff about this, and as I've just mentioned, is it really the environment that we're providing instruction? Is it really conducive to a testing environment? And so some decisions have been made to let's think about testing in the fall rather than testing in the spring, because we're just not going to be able to do it at this time based on all of the things that we have in place. And we think that we'll get better information if we wait until the fall. So those decisions have been made in terms of what the assessment looks like. And then that means we got to start getting ready for next year. And so preparing for 2020, 2021, what are beginning of the year assessments? I actually have a principal at the middle school level, because of their things that they need to get done at the end of the school year, which is provide schedules for all of their students, and they have many, many students. So this principal has worked with her teachers to create groups for next year based on the most recent data we had. So for many of us, as we prepared for spring break, we had middle of the year benchmarking, which gave us some data that we could use going into the spring semester, but we're really going to use that data to start to prepare for next year. So the groups are formed, but they're formed in a way where everybody's clear, the message has been clear, and it's communicated to all that these groups, when we do get, if in fact we are able to come back and test, when we get back into the classroom and we provide those assessments, these groups may change. But if for some reason we're not able to provide that assessment, we are going to do our group instruction this way. And so they're already making moves to begin that plan for next year. So that's what grouping looks like. And I've learned so much from the people that I work with in terms of administrators who are leading. I don't think that there's ever been a class that has prepared any of us for this time in schools or in life in general. And so for the administrators to be able to lead instructors through this, through staff members through this, I just, I really want to hand it to them, because they are really helping as we move forward. And then the staff members, everybody pitching in to help and make sure that this works. And so it just brings me to this final thought, and it's things to remember, which is this is new for all of us, right? None of us, I know I wasn't prepared for this, even though I provide remote support. I was not prepared for all of us to do this. And something that I like to remind my teachers is we weren't planning to do this. And if we were planning to do this, if this was an intentional thing to provide remote learning, it would have taken us at least a year to plan out all of the logistics and make sure that we were doing it right. And for many districts, it happened within a matter of a week or even a few days. And so I just want to commend everybody who's been a part of those planning teams or part of delivering instruction, because something that would have taken us so long to accomplish, we all got off the ground and got running it so quickly. And so we're all learning so much. We have to cut ourselves some slack, right? We've got to cut ourselves some slack, because we're all, I don't know if you are, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist and I want things to go a certain way. And we have to remember there are things through our MTSS team, we talk about there are things we can control and there are things that we can't. And so the things that we do have control over, like communication and the instruction that we're providing, those things we got to do our best at them, make sure we're doing what's right for kids and giving them everything that they need. The things that we can't control, we have to just work through those. And so, cut yourself some slack. You're doing an amazing job, and just remember to keep going. And the biggest thing is our kids are counting on us, whether they are relying on us for that contact of some sort of normalcy, or they're setting their schedule around the instruction that we provide. They're counting on us. And so I just know that whether this is something that we have to continue to do, or we may have to do again sometime in the future, or it's just a distant memory, when we remember that and reflect on what we've done, that we just have to give it our best. And that's all we can really do. And I imagine each of you that are watching this, that you all are doing that. And so keep up the good work.
I've got to ask, Melissa, thank you again for sharing you're so generous with your time and resources. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows how to communicate and connect with you directly after. But you told me a story, I think it was last week, about a teacher who, all those barriers are in place sometimes, and you don't have a lot of control over a lot of things right now. And every day the target's moving and everything's changing. But you talked about a teacher who had a student on the phone while you're Zoom coaching with her. And it was just such a great story. If you wouldn't mind telling that, I would love for everyone else to hear it too.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because yes, she's an amazing teacher, and she's been teaching for a while. I actually asked her, I said, so how many years? And she wouldn't tell me. And that tells me that she's given and dedicated so much of her time to all of her students. And I actually remember her being an elementary teacher when I was going to school. And so I know she's been doing it for a while, but she doesn't let anything stop her. And that's what I've learned about all the teachers that I work with. And as you mentioned, we were scheduled to do a Zoom meet, and the student was going to get online with us, and it just, for whatever reason, I think it was some connectivity issues, was unable to do that. And she called on the phone and said, all right, we're going to try this. And so she and I are on Zoom, and the student is on the phone with her, and she's open up your workbook to this page and read to me, and I'm going to ask questions. And she did. I mean, she conducted all of the pieces of instruction that she was able to do over the phone. She did it. And I can't, I smile when I think about it, because she didn't waste a frame. She was there for the entire scheduled time. She was on task. He was on task. They were moving through it. We were able to pace him forward and get things done. And when she hung up, and she and I were still on the Zoom, I said to her, so I want you to think about how long you've been doing this. I said, first of all, did you ever picture yourself teaching in this way? And she said, no, of course not. And I said, okay, now I want you to think about this. You just taught a student to read over the phone.
Yeah.
And we paused, and we both kind of laughed about it, but that's exactly what she was doing. Is she was providing instruction over the phone. And I know that this time has really pushed us to new levels, and really pushed us to new situations. And teachers are amazing, and they can adapt. And yeah, so she taught him over the phone.
I love that story. I've told it so many times since you told it to me, and I thought that just is so emblematic of the spirit of teachers everywhere. I mean, this is what we keep hearing over and over again. We're really lucky. I've been working with you for, over a decade now, I think. And I get to work with a lot of teachers all over the country. And I'm always so inspired by those stories. And they just keep coming. It's so fun to picture that. And we're all lucky to have all of you. I mean, this is exactly the point, right? We're all in it together.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to keep you any longer. And I am so thankful that you are so generous with your time. And Melissa's contact information is down there at the bottom, everyone. Feel free to reach out to her directly. She is hands down one of the most organized people I've ever met in my whole career, probably in life in general. So she has a lot of great resources, and she's just a great leader in literacy for sure, no doubt about that. She's actually been featured on our Lindamood-Bell radio podcast previously, way before all this remote learning was taken into effect. But that's a really great listen, but I hope we have her as a guest again on Lindamood-Bell Radio, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, thanks again for being here, Melissa. I really, really appreciate it. We all do.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Hope to see you in person soon. Bye-bye.